My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. My parents sent a group text 3 days before Christmas. They said don't show up. It was 3 days before Christmas. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the sound sharp in the quiet of my small house. I was making coffee, planning my gift wrapping for the evening, trying to work up some festive spirit that felt miles away. I picked it up. It was a group text from my mom. The chat was named Family 3, a title that felt more like an accusation than a term of endearment these days. My whole family was on it. Mom, Dad, my brother Mark, my sister Emma, even Aunt Linda. The message was short, terse. It read, "Christmas will be at our house this year. Claire, we think it's best if you don't show up. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment where you're watching from." I read it twice, then a third time. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like a misprint, a cruel joke that my brain couldn't quite process. Don't show up? To Christmas? To my family's Christmas? My own parents, typing those words out on a tiny screen, telling me I was uninvited. It was a punch to the gut, but also strangely not a surprise. It was a confirmation of a truth I had been avoiding for years. Then the replies started coming in, little bubbles of agreement popping up on the screen. A thumbs up emoji from Mark, a thumbs up from Emma, a thumbs up from Aunt Linda, who I had just sent money to last month for her car repairs, one after another. No one asked why. No one texted me privately to see if I was okay. No one defended me. Just those little yellow thumbs, a silent, unified chorus of approval. Cheering, almost. My fingers flew over the keyboard before I could even think. My own reaction, a cold, hard stone of defiance in my chest. I typed back, just as calmly as their message had been. Fine. You won't see me either. I hit send. The response was instant. A flood of clown emojis. From Emma. From Mark. My mom even sent one. Little digital faces with red noses, big, painted smiles, and tears of laughter streaming from their eyes. They were mocking me, openly, gleefully, like I was a joke, like my hurt was their evening's entertainment. It was the coldest, most brutal thing they had ever done. And it was the beginning of the end. People often looked at my life from the outside and saw success. A good job in project management, a small but well-kept house in a decent neighborhood, a reliable car. "You're so responsible, Claire," they'd say. "So good with money." They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that my responsibility was a cage and my money was never truly my own. Since the day I graduated from college with a business degree, I was, by a significant margin, the highest earner in my family. I didn't get lucky. I worked for it. I took the extra shifts when I was starting out. I studied for certifications on weekends, while my friends were out having fun. I took on the difficult projects at work that no one else wanted, the ones with the tight deadlines and the demanding clients. I did it because I was raised with a simple, powerful mantra: family helps family. I thought earning more meant I could help more. I thought it was my duty, my purpose. I see now that it was my trap. My brother, Mark, was the first real test of that belief. He'd gotten into a private university that was far beyond my parents' means. They were so proud. He was the first in our family to go to a school with a prestigious name. The first 2 years were a struggle, patched together with loans and my parents draining their meager savings. Then, the summer before his junior year, my mom called me. I was 26, and I had just finished paying off my own student loans. I finally had a little bit of breathing room, a small but growing savings account I'd earmarked for a down payment on a condo. "Claire, honey," she began, her voice thick with a carefully crafted worry. "It's about Mark. He's so stressed. He doesn't think he can go back this fall. The tuition, it's just too much." I could hear Mark in the background, not saying anything, just letting her fight his battles. It was a familiar dynamic. "He's thinking of dropping out," she continued, delivering the killing blow. "He's so close to finishing. It would be a tragedy. You wouldn't want that for your brother, would you?" Guilt, sharp and immediate, twisted in my gut. Of course I didn't want that. Mark, a dropout, the family's golden boy? The thought was unacceptable. "How much does he need?" I asked, my own condo dreams already starting to fade. The number she gave me made my stomach clench. It was nearly everything I had saved. "You're the only one who can help, Claire," she'd whispered. "You're so good with money." So I did it. I transferred the money. The thank you from Mark was a quick mumbled text. "The EX lifesaver." That was it. And I did it again the next semester, and the two after that. My down payment fund never recovered. Mark graduated with a fancy degree and zero debt, and I was back to square one. He got a job in a field he was passionate about, but it didn't pay well. His financial struggles never really ended. They just changed shape. Then there was my sister, Emma. Emma lived in a world of drama and aesthetics. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly incapable of managing her finances. Her life was a series of small, self-inflicted crises. The biggest one came when her old beat-up car finally died. She was hysterical. My mom called, of course. "Emma needs a car, Claire. She can't get to her job. She'll be fired." The unspoken addition was, "and then she'll be our problem." So really, she's your problem. I went with her to the dealership, intending to help her find a sensible used car. But Emma had other ideas. She fell in love with a brand new, bright red convertible that was far outside her budget. "Oh, but I love it, Claire," she'd gushed, running her hands over the hood. "It's so me." I tried to gently steer her toward a more practical sedan. "Don't be such a downer, Claire," she pouted. "Let me have something nice. For once, you have nice things." My nice things were the result of careful budgeting and sacrifice. Her nice things were emotional purchases she expected someone else to subsidize. In the end, my parents sided with her. I was pressured into not only making the down payment, but also co-signing the loan. "Her credit isn't great," my dad said with a shrug, as if it were a genetic condition and not a result of her own choices. "The bank needs a responsible party on the loan." I knew it was a mistake. I felt it in my bones. But saying no meant a massive family fight, tears from Emma, and disappointed sighs from my parents. So I signed. The missed payment started within 6 months. The first call from the bank came to me. I was horrified. It was a mark against my own credit, the score I had worked so hard to build. I called Emma, my voice tight with anger. "I had to get my hair done for a wedding," she'd explained, as if it were a medical emergency. "And I needed a new dress, you know how it is." I didn't. I paid her car note that month, and many months after that, just to protect myself from the consequences of her irresponsibility. And then there were my parents. Their mortgage was a constant source of anxiety. My dad worked a manual labor job, and his body was starting to fail him. My mom's part-time job barely covered the groceries. The calls became a monthly ritual. "Claire," the bank called again. "I don't know what we're going to do." At first, I'd send a few $100s to help them catch up, but it was never enough. One day, I drove to their house, and the sight of it broke my heart. The peeling paint, the overgrown garden, the general air of weariness. This was the house I grew up in. The guilt was suffocating. That evening, I went online and set up an automatic monthly transfer from my savings to their checking account. A significant amount, enough to cover the mortgage and then some. I told them it was a loan, that they could pay me back when they were on their feet. We all knew that day would never come. Over time, they stopped asking for the money, and I stopped calling it a loan. It just became another bill I paid. The mortgage on my own house and the mortgage on theirs. Even extended family wasn't off limits. When Aunt Linda got into a car accident and had a massive hospital bill she couldn't pay, the family held a crisis meeting. Everyone sat around the dining table, wringing their hands, talking about how terrible it was. And then, all eyes turned to me. "You're the only one with enough saved," my dad said. Not as a question, but as a statement of fact. I drained my emergency fund, the money I had painstakingly rebuilt for my own peace of mind, and paid her bill. Her thank you was a fruit basket, and a card that said, "You're a lifesaver." It seemed to be the family's designated phrase for me. Not a person, but a function. A floating device for them to cling to in a sea of their own making. For years, I told myself this was love, this was loyalty, this was the price of being the strong one. I sacrificed my own dreams, the travel I wanted to do, the condo I never bought, the investments I never made, on the altar of my family's needs. I see now that it wasn't loyalty they offered in return. It was just an endless, entitled dependency. My savings account was their safety net, and I was the one who was left in a constant state of freefall. The shift, the moment the ground beneath me truly began to crack, happened about a month before the Christmas text. It started innocently enough, with an invitation to a family dinner at my parents' house. The week leading up to it had been filled with a strange sort of energy. My mom's texts were unusually cheerful. Emma called me twice just to chat, something she hadn't done in years. Looking back, I see it for what it was. They were buttering me up. It was the calm, sunny weather before a Category 5 hurricane. I arrived on Sunday evening, bringing A ridiculously expensive bottle of wine I couldn't really afford but knew my father would appreciate. I was determined to be positive, to connect. The house was buzzing. Mark was there with his latest girlfriend. Dad was laughing loudly at something on TV, and Emma was showing my mom pictures on her phone. It felt almost normal, almost happy. We sat down to dinner, a pot roast that was slightly dry but made with effort. The conversation was light. They asked about my work, but not in a way that showed any real interest in my accomplishments. It was more like an audit. "Heard you landed the Apex account, Claire. Must have come with a nice bonus, huh?" Mark asked, nudging me with his elbow. "Big money." "It was a team effort," I said, deflecting, "and the bonus went to paying my property taxes." They all exchanged glances, a flicker of disappointment in their eyes. I had given the wrong answer. The money had been used for a responsibility, not saved up for their use. After the plates were cleared, my mom stood up, tapping her water glass with a spoon like she was about to make a wedding toast. Her face was alight with a giddy excitement. "Okay, everyone, I have a huge announcement to make," she declared, beaming at all of us. "We're going to Hawaii for Christmas." The table erupted. Emma shrieked with delight. Mark let out a whoop and high-fived his girlfriend. My dad sat back, a proud, satisfied smile on his face. They started talking all at once, a chaotic symphony of plans. "We have to go snorkeling. I want to see the volcanoes. Ooh, we can go to a luau." They had brochures. My mom pulled out a folder filled with printouts from travel websites, resorts, flight details, excursion packages. They hadn't just thought about this. They had planned it meticulously. I smiled, a little confused, but caught up in their excitement. My first thought was, how are we going to pay for this? But I pushed it down. I figured I'd be asked to chip in, maybe cover my own flight or a portion of the hotel. I started doing the math in my head, calculating what I could comfortably contribute without derailing my budget for the next few months. Then, my mom's gaze landed on me, pinning me in place. The giddy smile tightened into something more calculated. "And Claire," she said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the attention of the entire table, "we're all so grateful to you for making this possible. You're paying for everyone." The happy chatter died instantly. A thick, expectant silence fell over the room. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at my mom, sure I had misheard her. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "You're joking, right?" No one laughed. My father cleared his throat and slid a piece of paper across the table towards me. It was a spreadsheet, a detailed, itemized budget, flights for 6 adults, 2 adjoining ocean view rooms at a 4-star resort for 10 nights, a rental van, food allowance, excursion fees. At the bottom of the page, in bold, was the grand total, $1,452.78. My jaw went slack. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. This was a premeditated financial ambush. They had planned their dream vacation on my dime, without ever once thinking to ask me. $18,000? My voice was a whisper. "You expect me to pay for all of this?" "Well, yes, dear," my mom said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're the only one who can afford it. You have all those savings. You never spend it on anything fun anyway." "Anything fun?" I repeated, my shock turning into a hot flash of anger. "My savings are for my future, for a real house, not a rental, for retirement, for emergencies. It is not a slush fund for a luxury vacation for 5 other people," Emma scoffed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, Claire, don't be so dramatic. It's just money. This is about family, about making memories. I've never even been to Hawaii. Don't you want us to be happy?" "Of course I want you to be happy, Emma," I shot back, my voice rising. "But I can't just pull $18,000 out of thin air. That's a huge amount of money. It's an investment in family, Claire," my dad said, his tone turning stern and fatherly, the one he used when he was disappointed. "In me. We all work hard. We deserve a break. You're the one who made it. It's your responsibility to share your success with us. That's what families do." The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of his statement stunned me into silence for a moment. My success wasn't something to be shared like a pie. It was something I had bled for, sacrificed for. It was the result of countless nights and weekends. I had given up. "No," I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. I pushed the spreadsheet back across the table. "No, I can't do this. I won't." The atmosphere in the room shattered. It was no longer cold. It was arctic. My mom's face, which had been so full of light moments before, became a hard, unforgiving mask. Her lips thinned into a white line. "Selfish," she hissed, the word a venomous dart. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With selfishness." Mark shook his head, looking at me with a profound, theatrical disappointment, as if I'd just confessed to a terrible crime. Emma's eyes welled up with crocodile tears. "You're ruining Christmas," she whispered, her voice choked with fake emotion. I looked from face to face, searching for a single shred of understanding, of empathy. I found none. All I saw was a panel of judges who had found me guilty. Guilty of protecting myself. Guilty of saying no. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I have to go," I stammered, grabbing my purse. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. I walked out of the house, the sound of the door closing, behind me echoing with a terrible finality. I sat in my car for a long time in their driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I replayed every word, every look. The happy, excited family from an hour ago was gone, replaced by a pack of strangers united in their resentment of me. That night, I finally understood. My role in the family was fixed. I was the provider, the facilitator, the bank, and the moment. I refused to play my part. I wasn't just selfish, I was a traitor. The month that followed the Hawaii dinner was a study in silence. A cold, heavy, suffocating silence. The daily texts from my mom ceased. The weekly calls from my dad to check in and usually ask for a little something stopped. Emma and Mark, who would normally pepper me with requests via text, went completely dark. It was as if I had ceased to exist. I was being punished, excommunicated for my financial sin. The silent treatment was a weapon they had perfected over the years, and they wielded it with surgical precision. A part of me was relieved. The constant hum of their needs had finally quieted, but a larger, more wounded part of me ached. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification from someone else, my heart would leap with a pathetic, desperate hope, only to crash when I saw it wasn't them. I wrestled with a toxic mix of anger and guilt. I was furious at their entitlement, but the years of conditioning were a powerful force. A voice in my head, one that sounded suspiciously like my mother's, whispered that I had been selfish, that I had broken the family, that it was my fault. Despite everything, I went Christmas shopping for them. I bought my dad the expensive bottle of scotch he loved, my mom the cashmere sweater she'd admired in a catalog, Mark the noise-canceling headphones he wanted, and Emma a gift card to her favorite boutique. It was an act of foolish optimism, a peace offering to a family that was already at war with me. I wrapped the gifts carefully, writing their names on the tags in my neatest script, clinging to the childish hope that the spirit of Christmas would somehow thaw the ice between us. The beautifully wrapped presents sat in a pile by my front door, a monument to my own denial. The morning of December 22nd, I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach. The festive lights on my neighbors' houses seemed to mock my own isolation. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. Should I call? Should I text? Should I just show up on Christmas Eve like none of this ever happened? The indecision was paralyzing. That's when my phone buzzed. The group chat. Family 3. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is it, I thought. An apology. An invitation. I opened the message. Christmas will be at our house this year. Claire, we think it's best if you don't show up. The words were so simple, so direct. There was no room for misinterpretation. My body went cold, starting from my fingertips and spreading inward until it reached my core. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was a calculated, unified decision. And then came the thumbs up emojis. Mark's thumb, Emma's thumb, Aunt Linda's thumb. Pop, pop, pop. Each one a digital nail being hammered into the coffin of our relationship. They were all in on it. They had all agreed. I was out. A strange, defiant calm washed over me, displacing the hurt. If they were going to sever the limb, I would help them cut it clean. Fine, you won't see me either. I typed it without hesitation and hit send. And then, the clowns. The screen lit up with them. A cascade of mocking, laughing faces with their silly red noses and painted-on smiles. It was so juvenile, so unbelievably cruel, that it broke through my shock and reached something deeper. This wasn't just a dismissal, it was humiliation. They were dancing on the grave of my feelings, laughing as they did it. I dropped my phone on the table as if it had burned my hand. I sank into a chair, the strength gone from my legs. The clown emojis swam in my vision, and they triggered landslide of memories, a lifetime of slights and dismissals, all rushing back at once. I was 10 years old, and Mark, who was 12, got a brand new 10-speed bicycle for his birthday. I got his old, rusty hand-me-down with a wobbly wheel. "You're practical, Claire," my dad had said, ruffling my hair. "You don't need anything fancy." I was 16, and Emma, who was 14, had a dance recital. The entire family went. They bought flowers, took videos, and showered her with praise. 2 weeks later, I won the district-wide science fair. I came home with a blue ribbon and a small trophy. "Oh, that's nice, honey," my mom said without looking up from the TV. My trophy ended up on a dusty shelf in the back of the den. I remembered every time I was called too serious or too logical. It was always when I questioned their choices. When Mark wanted to drop a semester to find himself in Europe, I was the one who asked how he would pay for it. "God, Claire, live a little," he'd scoffed. When Emma wanted to invest in a multi-level marketing scheme, I was the one who pointed out it was a pyramid scheme. "You're just jealous of my ambition," she'd snapped. My logic was never seen as a strength. It was an obstacle to their whims. My practicality wasn't a virtue. It was a buzzkill. These weren't just memories. They were data points in a long, consistent graph that all pointed to one conclusion. My worth in the family was conditional. It was based on my utility. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who cleaned up messes and paid the bills. My role was to be the sturdy, boring foundation so they could be the decorative, exciting fixtures. And I had played the part so well for so long, I had mistaken it for love. The clown emojis hadn't broken me. They had awakened me. They were the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. The love I had been sacrificing everything for was a complete illusion. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource that had suddenly become inconvenient. The tears that I thought would come never did. Instead, a cold, hard resolve settled deep in my bones. I stood up from the table, my movements deliberate. I walked over to the pile of perfectly wrapped presents by the door. One by one, I picked them up and dropped them into a large black trash bag. My dad's scotch, my mom's sweater, Mark's headphones, Emma's gift card. They made soft thuds as they landed. When the bag was full, I tied it shut. The game was over. I wasn't playing anymore. The next day, I went to work. The world outside my front door was aggressively cheerful, draped in tinsel and lights. It felt like a foreign country. I drove through the familiar streets feeling like a ghost, an observer in a life that was no longer my own. Inside, I was a hollowed-out cavern of grief and fury, but on the outside, I was calm, deceptively calm. I put on my professional mask, the one that had never failed me. I smiled at my colleagues, made small talk about holiday plans, and sat down at my desk. Work was my sanctuary. It was a place of logic and order. Here, effort produced results. Competence was rewarded. A good idea was valued for its merit, not for how it could be exploited. It was the complete antithesis of my family life. I dove into a complex project spreadsheet, the neat columns and formulas a soothing balm for my chaotic mind. Around noon, my boss, Mr. Davies, called me into his office. He was a good man, in his late 50s, with a direct but fair demeanor. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Close the door, Claire," he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat down, my heart giving a nervous flutter, bracing myself for some end-of-year corporate restructuring. "Claire," he began, leaning forward on his desk, "corporate has approved the budget for the Denver expansion. We're officially greenlit to open a new regional office in Q1. My ears perked up. I had been on the preliminary planning team for this project. It was a massive undertaking, a huge opportunity for the company. "We need someone to lead it," he continued, his eyes fixed on me. "Someone who can build a team from scratch, manage the logistics of the new office, and hit the ground running. It's a regional manager position, a big step up." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he said something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "I've been watching you, Claire. You built the Miller account from nothing. You handled the logistics on the Apex merger when everyone else was panicking. Last year, when your department head was out on medical leave, you stepped up and ran the team flawlessly for 3 months without a single complaint. You don't just manage projects. You lead people. The job is yours if you want it. To be seen, to be truly seen, and valued for my skills, for my work ethic, for my contributions." On that day, of all days, it was a lifeline. Here was my boss, listing my accomplishments, validating my worth at the exact moment my family had thrown me in the trash. But even then, the conditioning was powerful. The voice of duty, of guilt, was a reflex I couldn't control. My first thought wasn't of the opportunity, but of the obligation I was supposed to have. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's an incredible offer. Thank you. But I can't." He looked genuinely surprised. "Why on earth not? This is the career move you've been working towards for years." "My family," I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "It's complicated. They're here. They rely on me. They use me," my mind screamed, but the old script was too ingrained. The idea of leaving the city, of putting that much physical distance between us, felt like a fundamental betrayal, even though they had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair, studying my face for a long moment. He was a smart man. He could see the turmoil behind my professional facade. He didn't press. He just nodded slowly. "All right, Claire. The offer stands for 1 week, but I want you to think about something. Think about what you want, not what anyone else needs or relies on. What do you, Claire, want for your life?" I walked back to my desk in a daze. His question echoed in my head. "What do you want?" I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me that. I couldn't remember the last time I had asked myself that. My life had been a series of reactions to their needs, their dramas, their emergencies. I pulled out a legal pad and drew a line down the middle. At the top of the left column, I wrote, "Stay." I tried to list the pros. Family. I stared at the word. What? Family? The one that uninvited me to Christmas and then laughed at my pain? Familiarity. The comfort of my house. My routine. A routine that included monthly financial drains and constant anxiety. Duty. The word felt heavy, like a chain. The list was short and hollow. On the right side, I wrote, "Go, Denver." The pen started to move, almost of its own accord. Promotion, higher salary, a fresh start, respect, the chance to build my own team, the chance to build my own life. No more mortgage payments for them. No more car payments for Emma. No more tuition for Mark. Freedom. The list grew longer and longer, each word a step towards a life I had never allowed myself to imagine. A life where my money was my own, where my time was my own, where my future was my own. I looked at the 2 columns. It wasn't a choice between 2 options. It was a choice between a cage and the open sky. My eyes fell on the black trash bag still, sitting by my desk, filled with the Christmas gifts I had bought for them. I thought of the clown emojis. I thought of the years of being a human ATM. The choice became blindingly, brilliantly clear. There was nothing left to stay for. The family I had been sacrificing everything for was a fantasy. My hand didn't shake. As I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Davies' extension, he answered immediately. "Claire?" "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice clear and steady. It was the voice of a woman making the biggest business decision of her life, the hostile takeover of her own future. "About the Denver position. Is the offer still on the table?" I could hear the smile in his voice. "For you, Claire, absolutely. I'll take it," I said. "I accept." After I hung up, a wave of sheer terror washed over me. I had just detonated my entire life. I was truly, completely alone now. But right behind the terror was another feeling, something wild and powerful and new. It was the exhilarating, terrifying, beautiful feeling of freedom. I looked out my office window at the city skyline. It was no longer a place that held me captive. It was just the place I was leaving. Denver was no longer a hypothetical. It was my future. And for the first time, I was running towards it, not away from something else. My acceptance of the Denver position wasn't a moment of triumphant music and cheering. After the initial surge of adrenaline, a cold, daunting reality set in. I had made a decision in a moment of clarity and rage, but now I had to execute it. I had to dismantle an entire life, piece by painful piece, and do it in absolute secrecy. I was no longer just leaving a job. I was engineering an escape. My first call was to a realtor, not the friendly neighborhood agent whose face was on bus benches, but a sharp, discreet professional named Helen, whom a colleague had once recommended for her efficiency. We met in a sterile coffee shop halfway across town. "So, you're looking to sell," Helen said, her pen poised over a notepad. "What's the timeline?" "Fast," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "as fast as humanly possible. And quiet. I don't want a for sale sign in the yard. Private showings only." Helen raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Moving for a new job? Something like that, I deflected, staring into my latte. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't say, my family has emotionally and financially bled me dry for over a decade, and their latest act of cruelty was so profound that I am now faking a corporate transfer to flee from them like a refugee. The shame of it was still too raw. It's a sensitive corporate relocation, I lied. Discretion is paramount. She nodded, accepting the lie without question. It was a transaction to her, and my fabricated story was just another detail. We talked about pricing, about staging, about the market. Every practical word felt like a step on a tightrope. One wrong move, one nosy neighbor mentioning the realtor's visit to my mother, and my entire plan could collapse. I left that meeting feeling a new kind of anxiety. It wasn't the dull, constant ache of my family's demands, but a sharp, focused fear of being discovered before I could get away. The next 2 weeks were a blur of calculated deception. I told my neighbors I was having the house deep cleaned and decluttered. This explained the boxes, the trips to donation centers, the strange cars of potential buyers parked briefly on our street. The packing itself was an emotional excavation. It wasn't just about putting things in boxes. It was about curating a life. Which pieces of my past were worth saving, and which were toxic artifacts that needed to be left behind. I started in the attic. I pulled out old photo albums, the pages sticky with age. There we were, a family. Mark and me on a swing set, Emma and me at her first dance recital, all of us on a beach vacation when I was a teenager, smiling for the camera. For a moment, a wave of grief washed over me. I remembered the good times, the laughter, the feeling of belonging I had once cherished. Was I throwing this all away? Then I turned a page and saw a photo from my college graduation. I was in my cap and gown, holding my diploma. My parents were on either side of me, but they were looking at each other, a worried expression on their faces. I remembered that day perfectly. They weren't celebrating my achievement. They were stressed about how they were going to pay Mark's tuition the following year. My success wasn't a cause for joy. It was the solution to their next problem. I closed the album. I couldn't throw them away. They were still a part of my history, but I couldn't look at them either. I sealed the box and labeled it past. It would go into a storage unit in Denver, a time capsule I might never open. I went through my closet, sorting clothes. A cashmere sweater my mom had given me for my 30th birthday. I remembered how she'd made a big show of it. Only, the best for my successful daughter, she'd said. A week later, she'd called asking for $2,000 to fix her car's transmission. The sweater wasn't a gift. It was an investment. I folded it and put it in the donation pile. A set of expensive golf clubs my dad had insisted I buy him for Father's Day. He'd used them twice. They went into the sell pile. Every object was tainted, a reminder of a transaction disguised as love. The hardest part, the final, irreversible step, was dismantling the financial ties. I waited until late one night, the house empty and echoing around me. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, the glow of the screen illuminating my face. I logged into my online banking. For a few minutes, I just stared at the screen, at the list of automatic payments scheduled to go out in a few days. My financial life laid bare. First, the mortgage, the largest payment, a transfer of over $1,000 to my parents' account. I clicked on it. I remembered the night I set it up, the feeling of adult responsibility, of filial duty. I had felt proud to be able to help them, to provide them with security. Now, all I felt was the sting of exploitation. My finger hovered over the cancel payment button. A flicker of guilt. What will they do? Rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down, the memory of the laughing clown emojis a potent antidote. I clicked the button. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? I clicked yes. The line item on the screen vanished. A knot in my chest that I didn't even know was there began to loosen. Next, Emma's car loan. This one was easier. There was no love attached to this payment, only resentment. I canceled the automatic transfer. Then I went a step further. I drafted a formal, notarized letter to the bank and the auto lender, stating that I was relinquishing all financial responsibility for the loan I had co-signed, effective immediately. I knew it would likely damage my credit score. It was a messy, imperfect solution. But the freedom from that obligation was worth more than a few points on a credit report. Then, the smaller, more insidious transfers. The $100 a month I sent to Mark for gas and groceries. The 75 a month to Aunt Linda, which started as a one-time gift and had somehow morphed into a regular stipend. I deleted them all. Click, gone, click, gone. With each one, I felt lighter. I was snipping the threads of a web that had entangled me for years. In less than 10 minutes, it was done. I closed the laptop. The silence in the house was different now. It was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of sovereignty. The last few days were surreal. The house sold quickly to a young couple eager to start a family. I watched them during the final walkthrough, their faces full of dreams for the future. I felt a pang of envy, but also a sense of peace. The house had been a symbol of my independence, but it had also been a prison, the place they could always find me. Now, it would be a home for someone else. I lived out of 2 suitcases, sleeping on an air mattress in my empty bedroom. I ate takeout on the floor and watched movies on my laptop. My phone was blessedly quiet. The family was still giving me the silent treatment, blissfully unaware that I was about to make it permanent. Their punishment had become my shield, the perfect cover for my escape. On the final day, I cleaned the house from top to bottom, wanting to leave it perfect for the new owners. I handed the keys to Helen, my realtor. She wished me luck in my new role. I didn't correct her. I walked to my car, which was packed to the roof. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. There was nothing left to see. The first 2 weeks in Denver were a blur of logistics and anonymity. I found a temporary corporate apartment, started my new role, and tried to navigate a city where every street was unfamiliar. The silence from my family continued, a vast, empty space that I was slowly starting to fill with my own life. I knew the silence was a dam, and that eventually, the pressure of reality would break it. I just didn't know when. The first crack appeared exactly 16 days after I left. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting when my phone, set to silent, vibrated against the conference table. A voicemail notification popped up. It was from my mom. My heart lurched, an old, conditioned response. I excused myself and went to the hallway to listen. Her voice was not apologetic or concerned. It was annoyed, laced with an impatient confusion. "Claire, it's Mom. The bank just called. They said the mortgage payment was declined for insufficient funds. I think you must have made a mistake with your account or something. It's never been late before. Call me back so we can get this sorted out." I stood in the quiet hallway of my new office building, the skyline of a new city visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I listened to her words, her tone of casual expectation that I would, of course, fix her problem. There was no, "How are you?" No, "We haven't heard from you." Just a problem that needed my money. I felt nothing. No guilt, no panic, no rage, just a distant clinical detachment. I was a scientist observing the predictable reaction of a failed experiment. I pressed the delete button without a second thought and went back to my meeting. That was the first ripple. The tsunami hit a week later. The first of the month had come and gone. My phone began to blow up. The voicemails came one after another, a cascade of panic, entitlement, and fury. The first was from my dad. His voice was a roar. "Claire, where is the money? Your mother has been crying for 2 days. The bank is sending threatening letters. What the hell is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Call us back right now. This isn't a game." I deleted it. The next was Emma. It was almost incoherent, a shrieking, hysterical mess of sobs and accusations. "They took my car, Claire. They took it. A tow truck came to my work and repossessed my convertible right out of the parking lot in front of everyone. This is your fault. My credit is ruined. I have no way to get to work. How could you do this to me? I hate you." I listened to the entire message, my expression unchanged. Then I deleted it. Then came Mark. His tone was one of pure, undiluted entitlement. The voice of a man who had never faced a real consequence in his life. "Claire, my rent check bounced. My landlord is threatening to evict me. I'm going to be homeless because of you. What the hell is your problem? I need that money. You can't just cut me off. I'm your brother." I deleted it before he was even finished. It became a strange, new morning ritual. I would make my coffee in my quiet Denver apartment, sit by the window that looked out onto the mountains, and listen to the frantic, unraveling chaos of the world I had left behind. It was like watching a documentary about a distant, dysfunctional tribe. Their problems, which had once been the central, crushing weight of my existence, were now just audio files I could dispose of with the flick of a thumb. The breaking point. for them came when they finally realized I wasn't just ignoring them. After 2 weeks of their calls going straight to voicemail, they did what I knew they would. They drove to my house. I heard the story months later from my cousin Sarah, who had been roped into driving them. They pulled up to the curb, a united front of indignation. My mom, my dad, Mark, and Emma. They marched up the walkway and started banging on the door. They yelled my name. They hammered on the wood with their fists, their frustration boiling over. The door finally opened, but it wasn't me. It was a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, with a confused expression and a toddler clinging to her leg. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice wary. My mother pushed forward. "We're here to see Claire, my daughter. Tell her to come." To the door. The woman's expression softened with dawning comprehension. "Oh, you must be her family. I'm sorry, but Claire doesn't live here anymore. My husband and I bought the house from her. We moved in about a month ago." Sarah said the four of them just stood there, frozen on the porch. Their faces, she described, were a perfect portrait of shock and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" My father sputtered. "She can't have sold the house." "She did," the woman said kindly. "She said she was relocating for a big job opportunity. I think she mentioned Colorado?" The realization hit them all at once. I wasn't hiding, in the house, ignoring their calls. I wasn't punishing them with a few weeks of silence. I was gone, vanished. I had not just ignored them, I had erased them. The voicemails after that day changed in tone. The anger was still there, but it was now laced with a desperate, panicked pleading. They tried to get my new address from my old company, but HR, citing privacy policies, refused to give them any information. My legal letter to the auto lender had been a smart move. They couldn't come after me for Emma's repossessed car. They were completely and utterly cut off. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. They had built their entire world on the foundation of my compliance and my income. I had just pulled that foundation out from under them, and they were left standing in the rubble, screaming into a void that would never answer back. Meanwhile, 3 states away, I was buying a new couch, meeting my colleagues for happy hour, and learning how to breathe again. The chaos of my family's collapse was a distant storm, its thunder muffled by the 1,000 miles I had put between us. In Denver, my world was quiet, orderly, and entirely my own. The initial terror of being alone had faded, replaced by the steady, satisfying work of building a new life from the ground up. My new role was everything I had hoped it would be. I wasn't just a project manager executing someone else's vision. I was the architect of my own. I spent the first few months in a whirlwind of activity, securing office space, interviewing candidates, and establishing our presence in a new market. I hired a team of bright, ambitious people who were drawn to the challenge of a new venture. I remembered how my family had always dismissed my work as something cold and meaningless, just a way to generate cash. But here, I saw the impact of my efforts every day. I mentored a young woman fresh out of college, helping her navigate her first big corporate project. I saw her confidence grow, and it filled me with a sense of pride that was deeper and more real than any feeling I'd had paying my family's bills. We celebrated our first big client win with a team dinner, and as I looked around the table at the faces of people who respected me for my mind and my leadership, I felt a sense of belonging that was entirely untainted by obligation. But I knew that a life built only around work would be just another kind of cage. In my old life, I had no time or energy for anything else. Here, I made a conscious choice to build a community. On a whim, I signed up for a weekend hiking group I found online. The first Saturday, I stood awkwardly at the trailhead, surrounded by strangers in hiking boots and backpacks, and felt a familiar surge of anxiety. But as we started up the trail, the crisp mountain air and the rhythmic crunch of boots on dirt began to calm me. The conversation was easy and impersonal, about trails and gear and the beauty of the Rockies. No one asked me about my family or my past. They just knew me as Claire, the new woman from the city who was surprisingly fast on the inclines. At the summit, as we all stood there, breathing hard and looking out at a breathtaking panorama of snow-capped peaks, I felt a sense of peace that was so profound it almost brought me to tears. These were my mountains now. This was my sky. It was in that hiking group that I met Michael. He was a geologist, a kind, quiet man with a quick smile and eyes that seemed to see everything. Our friendship started slowly, built on shared miles and trail mix. He was easy to be around. independent and self-sufficient in a way that I found deeply reassuring. One evening, after a long hike, he asked me to dinner. It wasn't a high-pressure date, just a casual meal at a local brewery. We sigh. We're talking about our childhoods when he asked the inevitable question, "Are you close with your family?" I felt a familiar clench in my stomach, the old instinct to lie or deflect. But I looked at him, at his open, non-judgmental face, and I decided to try a version of the truth. "No," I said, my voice even. "We're not. We have very different ideas about what family means. I moved here for a fresh start." I braced myself for the follow-up questions, the probing for drama. Instead, he just nodded. "A fresh start can be a powerful thing," he said. "I'm glad you found one here." And then he changed the subject. In that moment, he gave me a gift I hadn't realized I so desperately needed, the gift of acceptance, without explanation. Our relationship grew from there, not a whirlwind romance, but something much better, a slow, steady partnership built on mutual respect. With my time and money finally my own, I started to discover who I was when I wasn't serving someone else's needs. I took a pottery class on Tuesday nights and found a deep, meditative joy in the messy, imperfect process of shaping clay with my hands. I made a series of lopsided, lumpy bowls, and I cherished them more than any expensive object I had ever owned. I adopted a goofy, one-eyed dog from a local shelter, a scruffy terrier mix I named Wally. The first time he fell asleep with his head in my lap, I felt a surge of pure, unconditional love that was so overwhelming. I sat perfectly still for an hour so I wouldn't disturb him. A year after I arrived in Denver, I bought a small house with a little patch of a backyard. It was smaller than my old house, but it was all mine, with no ghosts and no obligations attached. That spring, I spent every weekend in the garden. I dug my hands into the rich, dark soil and planted flowers, zinnias and cosmos and lavender. I didn't know what I was doing, but I nurtured them, watered them, and watched as they grew from tiny seeds into a riot of vibrant color. Kneeling there in the dirt, with Wally sleeping in a patch of sun beside me and the mountains standing guard in the distance, I knew I was home. I was planting roots in a life that I had built, in a place where I was valued, and in a future that was finally, blessedly, my own. Almost 2 years passed, 2 years of quiet growth, steady work, and deepening peace. My life in Denver had taken root and blossomed. Michael and I had moved in together. Wally was the undisputed king of our little house, and my career was thriving. The frantic, angry voicemails from my family had stopped long ago, replaced by a vast, uninterrupted silence. They had become ghosts, figures from a past life that felt increasingly distant and unreal. Then one afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. "Hello? Claire?" The voice was hesitant, familiar. "It's me, Sarah, my cousin." I hadn't spoken to her since before I left. Sarah had always occupied a neutral territory in our family's wars, never a tormentor, but never an ally either. She was a passive observer, and I had learned long ago that in the face of cruelty, passivity is a choice. "Sarah," I said, my voice flat. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, I know," she said, and I could hear the weariness in her voice. "Listen, I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us, but I thought you should know what's been going on." I leaned against my kitchen counter, looking out at my garden, a fortress of my own making. "Okay," I said, my voice betraying nothing, and then she opened the floodgates. It wasn't a plea or an accusation. It was just a bleak, tired report from a battlefront I had long since deserted. "They lost the house, Claire," she began, her voice low. "The bank foreclosed about 6 months after you left. It was ugly. They're renting a tiny rundown apartment now, across town. Uncle Charles's back is so bad he can barely work anymore, and Aunt Margaret's part-time job at the library doesn't even cover their rent. They're struggling, badly." I listened, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow echo. "Mark is a mess," she continued. "He had to get 2 roommates, and he hates them. He's working his day job, and then he waits tables 3 nights a week to make rent. All he does is complain about how unfair his life is. He's learning what it's like to pay his own bills," I thought, but I said nothing. "And Emma, God, Emma," Sarah sighed. "After they repossessed the convertible, her credit was completely shot. She couldn't get a loan for a bicycle. She had to move back in with my mom, Aunt Linda. They fight constantly. Emma feels trapped, and my mom is at her wit's end. She paused, and then her voice dropped even lower. And my mom, she's exhausted, Claire. She's trying to help everyone, but she's broke now, too. She told me last week. She told me she regrets it all. She said she should have stood up for you. She said she was a coward. I processed the information. It was a litany of failures, a portrait of a system that had collapsed once its central pillar was removed. These were the natural, logical consequences of their choices. A life without my financial support was exactly this. A life they had to support themselves. Then came the part I had been waiting for. The test. They miss you, Claire, Sarah said softly. They really do. They realize they made a huge mistake. There it was. The opening. The subtle plea for me to feel pity, to feel guilt, to step back into my old role as the savior. But 2 years of freedom had forged a new kind of strength in me. They didn't make a mistake, Sarah, I said, my voice calm and clear and final. They made a choice. For years, they made choices that benefited them at my expense. The Christmas text wasn't a mistake. It was a summary of my entire value to them. They showed me exactly who they were, and I finally decided to believe them. Their problems are not my problems anymore. They sent laughing clown emojis when they broke my heart. There is no coming back from that. I could hear Sarah crying softly on the other end. I know, she whispered. You're right. I'm so sorry, Claire. I have to go, Sarah, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I wished her well, and then I ended the call. I had not been cruel, but I had been clear. The door was not just closed. It was locked and bolted. A few days later, a forwarded email appeared in my inbox. It was from Emma. The subject line was simply, I'm sorry. I opened it with a sense of morbid curiosity. It was a masterclass in the non-apology. Dear Claire, it began. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about everything that happened. I am so sorry for how things ended up. I know you must have been hurt. I was going through a lot back then, and I didn't handle things well. We were all so stressed about money. We didn't mean for it to go that far. We just missed the way things were when we were all a family. I really hope that someday you can find it in your heart to forgive us. We are your family after all, and you can't change that. I read it twice. It was all there. The justifications, the I statements, the classic rewriting of history. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for the consequences that had befallen her. She didn't miss me. She missed my money and the easy life it provided. The email wasn't an olive branch. It was a lure, baited with a hollow apology, designed to pull me back into the drama. I looked at the email for a long moment. Then, with a steady hand, I moved the cursor to the little trash can icon and clicked. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this message? I clicked OK. It vanished from my life. A final digital act of cleansing. The story could have ended there, with the finality of a deleted email. But the real resolution wasn't in an action. It was in a feeling. It arrived on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening, several months later. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. I was in my garden, kneeling in the soft dirt, pulling up a few stubborn weeds from around the base of my rose bushes. The air was warm and smelled of freshly cut grass and lavender. Michael was at the grill on our small patio, humming along to the radio as he flipped burgers. Wally was asleep in a patch of clover, his one good eye twitching as he chased rabbits in his dreams. It was a scene of such simple, profound peace that it stopped me. I sat back on my heels, my hands covered in soil, and just took it all in. This was my life, this quiet, beautiful, stable life. I had built it. I thought about the concept of revenge. For years, a small dark part of me had probably fantasized about the day my family would get their comeuppance, the day they would have to face the consequences of their actions. But when Sarah had called and delivered the news of their downfall, I hadn't felt the triumphant surge I might have once expected. Their chaos didn't bring me joy. Their struggle didn't make me happy. It just made me feel tired. I realized then that I had never truly wanted revenge. What I wanted was peace. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was my escape. My victory was this garden, this sunset, this quiet evening. My mind drifted to the idea of forgiveness. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant letting them back in, pretending what they did wasn't so bad, resuming some semblance of a relationship. I see now that I was wrong. I have forgiven them. I have let go of the anger and the bitterness. because those feelings were a poison in my own heart. I set down that heavy weight, not for them, but for me. But my forgiveness does not require reconciliation. It does not require me to place my hand back in the fire that burned me so badly. Forgiveness is the final act of my own healing, the closing of a door within my own soul. It has nothing to do with them. I thought about the word family. For 34 years, it had been a word associated with obligation, guilt, anxiety, and debt. It was a blood tie that felt more like a leash. But as I looked at Michael, who respected me, and thought of the friends who celebrated my successes, and glanced at the sleeping dog who offered nothing but pure, uncomplicated love, I understood. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who nurtures you, who respects you, who wants you to be your best self without asking for anything in return. It's about the people who help you plant your garden. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a group of dependents and, in the process, built a real one. Michael walked over, holding out a plate with a perfectly cooked burger on it. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You looked a million miles away," he said softly. "What are you thinking about?" I looked up at him, at this kind man who was my partner, my friend, my family. I smiled back, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached all the way to my soul. "Nothing," I said, taking the plate. "Everything, just that I'm happy." And I was. The silence from my old life was no longer a punishment they had inflicted or a weapon I was wielding. It was just the peaceful, gentle soundtrack to my new one. If you've ever had to walk away from family for your peace, drop a comment. Hit like if you believe peace is worth more than fake loyalty. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories.